Where is Reverend Bethany? Oh, here she is. Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. You're amazing. My name is Muhyiddin, or Muhyi. I'm with the Arizona Palestine Solidarity Alliance. How do you like our new banner? All right? Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the UUCT for hosting us and tolerating our last minute, many things just happened, But they were just amazing getting us ready. So this is Reverend Bethany, the pastor here. I have something Palestinian for you. That is you are officially a radical Palestinian. And of course, a bottle of Palestinian olive oil, the best olive oil in the world. And olive oil goes with za'atar, what za'atar is? Okay. This is authentic Palestinian za'atar. And this is what we use to serve. We get the tag out of here.
That's very sweet.
Zayt or za'atar. Okay, that's okay. Thank you. Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Bethany Russell Lowe, and I have the great pleasure and honor of serving this congregation. It is so good to see a full house this evening, this week. Welcome here. Bring all of who you are here to this space. I just have housekeeping, which is where the bathrooms are and where to get water. We have some gendered restrooms behind you and to your right. There's a men's and a women's room there, multi-stall, and we also have a gender-neutral, handicap-accessible behind you, behind the AV desk, more to your left. So please make use of those, and there's a water bubbler out in the lobby as well, near the gendered bathrooms if you need that. Welcome. It is so good to see you.
Okay, I also would like to thank our partners, Jewish Voice for Peace, and Arizona Palestine Network, and I'd like our APSA people who have been working all day to prepare that food, so please stand up, All of you are, maybe they're not here, they're still out there. Huh? All right, well, thank you. But that's Mona Hijazi. Mona is our communications director and state coordinator. So she is directs all communication. We have chapters now in addition to Tucson, where we started, in Phoenix metro area, in Yuma, in Flagstaff, in Bisbee, and more coming soon, hopefully. Okay, I know that on your mind and on everybody's mind is what happened on Tuesday. We're not going to spend a lot of time, or unless Jonathan wants to, But that's not what we're here today. But I'd like to say a couple of things. Could I have the next slide, please? Just I want you to read this slide. So, I guess compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness is what brings us together today. It is really very difficult to describe in a few sentences what's happening in our country here, and of course, what's happening in Palestine, and what's happening all over the world. Humanity is suffering practically everywhere. And a lot of it has to do, unfortunately, with our country. So we've been thinking since before the elections, because our young people are troubled, or all of us are troubled, by the fact that this democracy doesn't work for our communities. And we need something different. So a group of young people started a new movement. It's just in the initial stages, and anybody who will join it will become, one of the founders. Isn't that something important for you? Could I have the next slide, please? Oh, here it is. Okay. It's called Movement for Democracy, Justice, and Peace. That is, believe democracy, if it is a true democracy, should produce justice. And justice should produce peace. So we hope that you can go to mdjp.org and we'll see the list of principles we have over there. But I hope that all of us will really be very bold and creative in trying to find another way. Okay? We need to be very imaginative. Okay? And with that compassion and energy that we have, hopefully the coming weeks and months and days will be different for all of us and for humanity in general. Now here I am honored today, the next slide please, to introduce Jonathan Kuttab. This is the first time I meet Jonathan in person, but I am familiar with his work as an activist for Palestinian rights, co-founder of Al-Haq, a human rights Palestinian organization, very well regarded internationally. Okay? Although the Israelis banned it, I guess, but they banned everything. So that's an honor, I guess, realizing the value of such an organization. He is also the executive director of Friends of Sabil North America. Sabil is a Palestinian Christian liberation theology organization based in Jerusalem, and Friends of Sabil North America is the support group here. It's a 501c3 organization here in the United States. I won't talk more about that, but Jonathan will do that. And so I am honored and welcome to welcome a great Palestinian activist to share with us what's next, what's happening, and what's next for Palestine. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you very much for this wonderful introduction, and I am very pleased at this presence here in Tucson. It actually begins to answer one of the questions that has always troubled me. Because, you know, when the Holocaust took place in Germany, it mostly took place in the dark. Many people, including Germans, said they didn't know this was happening until after the war, that this massive killing of people. The genocide against the Palestinians, however, is taking place in the light of day. Everybody can see it on an almost daily basis, despite the clear bias of the media. Enough stuff comes out in social media to show a level of massive killing and destruction against an entire population, a total ignoring of international law principles, the erasing of distinction between civilian and military, between combatants and non-combatants, an open use of genocidal language. There are no innocents. They have to be destroyed, crushed, literally made level with the ground. Use of genocidal language like Amalek. They are subhuman. There are no innocents. Openly saying we're cutting off their water and food. Openly demanding that they leave massively their areas. Doesn't matter where, because wherever they go, we'll bomb them as well. Razing them to the ground. Not just military structures, supposedly command and control centers, but entire neighborhoods, schools, mosques, churches, universities and colleges, all of them, hospitals and clinics, all of them without exception. How is it possible that this is happening? In Germany, I always say a lot of Jewish people said, "Where is God?" Many of them even lost their faith. Palestinians, certainly Palestinian Christians, say, "Where are God's people? Why are they silent? Why don't we hear from them?" So I am not going to talk actually a lot about Gaza, because the call for a ceasefire, which is so minimal, is not really a call to end the problem or to solve it. It really says, get your knee off my neck. Ceasefire, stop it. And then we can talk. The call to allow food and water and medicine and basic shelter, tents and flowers in, is not really a solution. It's just saying, I can't breathe. I'm using the American analogy. I can't breathe. Let me breathe, and then we can talk. So I am deliberately moving beyond that discussion, even though I know it's a discussion we need to have. We absolutely, desperately need a ceasefire. We absolutely and desperately need open access, lifting of the siege, allowing food, water, medicine, supplies, ordinary, basic life. But beyond that, we need to resolve the problem. We need to think what comes next, what is beyond. And to do that, we have to be aware that there are, in fact, two narratives and two ideologies that have been in conflict for the last 100 years. Not longer. Those who tell you this is an eternal problem going back to Jacob and Esau are lying. Jews, Christians, and Muslims for 13 centuries lived together in relative peace and equanimity. Since the Crusader times until this past century. And we can live together again. It is possible. But since the rise of the Zionist movement, there have been two narratives that are at loggerheads. Two ideologies, two thought processes. One of them you're very familiar with, the Zionist one. Very briefly, it says that we, the Jewish people, have been unfairly treated, discriminated against, and they're right. Anti-Jewish bigotry, I don't like to call it anti-Semitism because we are Semites too. Anti-Jewish bigotry has been a phenomena of Western Christian life for centuries or millennia. Jews have been discriminated against, have been oppressed, have been beaten down, have been denied their rights in Western countries for centuries or millennia. And they have every right to fight against, and we should be their partners in fighting against that evil that's been called anti-Semitism. But that's a Western Christian phenomena. Has nothing to do with Arabs or Islam, and certainly not with Palestinians. But in that narrative, they are a people without a land, and they're seeking a land, if we can have the map of Palestine, a land without a people. Because in that narrative, Arabs and Palestinians don't really exist. The P word, Palestinian, would you believe to this day, is taboo in some circles. I understand even NPR initially refused to announce this meeting because it was the Palestine Arizona Network. They said, that's a political organization. FTC doesn't allow us to do. Can you imagine NPR not doing anything political? In Phoenix, correct. But in that narrative, Jews needed a land without a people for a people without a land. They came to their ancient homeland. They'll tell you, we have religious connection to this land. Of course they do. Once a year they say, next year in Jerusalem. I tell them, you know that Muslims, not once a year, but 5 times every day, turn towards Mecca to pray. Gives them no rights in Saudi Arabia or its oil wealth. Sorry. They tell you, of course, we have historical connections. We used to have a kingdom there for about 100, 150 years, 3,000 years ago. And I say, absolutely. You know how many countries used to have a kingdom there? That's why they call it the Middle East. It's in the middle between Asia, Europe, and Africa. So if I were going to name to you the countries that used to have sovereignty there for several hundred years, starting with Italy, the Romans, Spain, sometimes, no, not Spain, Italy, Greece, Syria, Iraq, Turkey, Egypt, Iran, Persia. Who didn't have a country there? Everybody used to have a country there. That doesn't give them these historic rights forever to take over that land. But in that narrative, the necessity, the need, the requirement to make that land as Jewish as France is French, because it's their land. Because God gave it to them. Sure, the promised land. Because the Balfour Declaration gave it to them. Because the United Nations gave it to them. Because they need it. Because of power, they took it. For whatever reason, in that narrative, that is a Jewish country, the only Jewish country. Why can't we have a country of our own? That's one narrative. All we want is peace, shalom. If you know any Hebrew, good morning is shalom, good evening is shalom, hello is shalom, goodbye is shalom. It's shalom this, shalom that, everything is shalom. One of the most militarized countries in the world, the only word you hear is shalom, shalom. All we want is shalom. And for them, shalom means leave us alone, let us do what we want, don't interfere. Shalom. And if anybody opposes us, it's because if it's there an extension of that evil of anti-Semitism that I mentioned earlier. If you oppose us, no matter what we're doing, you're being anti-Semitic. If you oppose us, if you do BDS, boycotts, divestment, sanction, nonviolent action, that's nonviolent. If you call for a ceasefire, if you want us to stop, you're being anti-Semitic. So you have that one narrative, and it's a powerful narrative, and it is heard by many people, and in fact, it's the default narrative in the West. In many churches, it has a religious connotation, but also in society at large. They're the good people, the wonderful people. They are like us, Judeo-Christian. They are westernized. They are the only democracy in the Middle East. They are our most dependable ally. They are like us. And in this community, I think I can say they're almost white. They're like us. They're we. That's one narrative. And to have that narrative, you need to make that place as Jewish as France is French. But there is a second narrative which you almost never hear about, which is the Palestinian narrative, the Arab narrative, which says, look, we are the people of the land. This land is not empty. This land is fully populated. We are a multicultural, multi-religious society. We are the result of so many wars and so many conquerors and so many religious people who came and who settled and who made this their home. We can trace our history back not only to Jesus' time, but even before the initial Hebrew invasion of Palestine when the Canaanites were there. Like every third world country, we were living under initially Ottoman and later European colonialism and imperialism. And we want our freedom. We want our self-determination. We want to set up our country. So when the Jews who were escaping from persecution in the West, particularly after the Holocaust in Germany, started coming to Palestine, the question is, are they coming seeking refuge, or are they coming seeking conquest and domination? So the Palestinian says, look, you can't come here and make this place Jewish. It's not Jewish, it's Arab. There are some Jews, of course, and there are some Christians, and there are some Muslims, but this is not a Jewish place. This is an Arab place. Palestine, Arabiya, Palestine is Arab. And the British and Balfour Declaration has no right to give away our land to others. And religion, Judaism is a respected religion, but Zionism is not an acceptable ideology, because Palestine, Arabiya, and all these foreigners who are coming to take this land are foreigners. They belong in their countries, wherever their countries are. They can come and visit on pilgrimage just like Muslims go to Mecca. They cannot stay and they cannot say this is ours. So these two ideologies, Palestine, Arabiya, Palestinian nationalism, and Zionism, which says it should be as Jewish as France is French, have been at loggerhead. There's no question about it. They live in zero-sum situation. They fight over every dunam and over every soul, because the more land you take, the less land we have. The more immigrants you bring in, the greater your population. The more children and babies we have, the more dangerous it is for you demographically, and we are at loggerheads. So if we are thinking about what's next, we have to recognize that these two movements have been unable to totally eradicate or remove each other. We Palestinians certainly don't have the power to get rid of Israeli Jews. But by the same token, they cannot get rid of us. With every possible advantage on their side, the Zionist movement has failed, has utterly failed. You know, in 1967, I'm not going to go into all the history, what happened in 1948 when the state was created and the Palestinians were kicked out of their homes and became refugees. But in 1967, Israel occupied the rest of historic Palestine, as you see in this map. How what was Arab land in green on the left map in 1946, the proposed partition of 1947, the actual creation of the State of Israel in 1948, and the situation today. But in 1967, when they occupied the rest of Palestine, the Israelis announced to the whole world that this was a preemptive defensive war. They say, we didn't start it. Yes, we did, but we knew we were going to be attacked, so we attacked first. We have no ambition. We're not trying to take anything. We're just defending ourselves. So a new idea came about, which is called the two-state solution. Namely, why don't the Palestinians take that third map, the West Bank and Gaza, and make it into a Palestinian state and leave the rest of Palestine, 78% of it, for us as a Jewish state. And many Palestinians, myself included, and much of the world thought this was a good compromise. Not the best, but it's a compromise. They can have part of Palestine, the bigger and the better half, and we can have another part. At least we will have a state of our own. What we didn't know is that Zionism is not limited to the state of Israel. They really wanted all the land. And so they started putting up, if we can have the next map, they started putting up Jewish settlements all over the occupied territories. This map doesn't show it very well, but in the West Bank, throughout the West Bank, they started setting up areas that were for Jews only, not for Israelis, for Jews only. Today, there's about 700,000 or 800,000 Jewish people living in what was supposed to be a Palestinian state or a Palestinian area. It reached the point where it became impossible to unscramble the egg. That to remove 700,000 or 800,000 Jews from what was to be the state of Palestine was difficult, if not impossible. Not only that, but these Jews were living in separate areas that were spread throughout the West Bank, that were connected with each other and with Israel by a network of roads that served Jews only. They had separate laws applying to them. They had separate courts applying to them. They had a separate health system, social welfare, educational system, economic system that was, in every possible sense of the word, an apartheid system. What the world realized is that that system is really the same system ultimately that applied in Israel itself, because it was a result of the conflict that I mentioned at the beginning. The state of Israel has to be a Jewish state, a state of all the Jews, not a state of all its citizens, because 20% of the citizens of Israel are not Jewish, are Arab, even though they are not allowed and they're not given political rights. They have the right to vote for the Knesset, but their representatives in the Knesset are not allowed to wield real power or to be on any of the committees or part of the governing power. What is next? Where do we go from here? I wrote a little book there called Beyond the Two-State Solution, which you can either purchase or download for free in Arabic, English, or Hebrew. And it has a nice summary at the end, an executive summary for those who don't like to read the whole book. You can just read the summary. Basically, I said, both of these movements have failed their people. And I'm not saying that there is any symmetry or equality between them. I am saying that the reality is that today in Palestine, there's two groups. There's Jewish Israelis who have all the rights and who can live wherever they want and exercise their full power. Their Knesset is the one that sets the rules and the laws for everybody. They control all entry and exit points. They control the airspace, the cyberspace, the coast, the entrances, everything. And there's another group, their numbers, by the way, are about 7 million. And there's another group called Palestinians. Call them by their name. They are Palestinians. This group has been divided by Israel into 5 different categories. And each category has totally separate and different rights from the other categories, and are in fact physically and geographically separated from them. There are those who are Israeli citizens. They have the most rights, although they don't have full equality. There are those who are Jerusalem residents like myself, about 350,000 of us. We are residents, but not citizens. There are those in the West Bank who are under military rule by Israel. Even though there is a Palestinian Authority, it really is under Israel's rule. And there are those in Gaza who are under siege and who are kept separate and distinct from the West Bank, from Israel, from Jerusalem, and the outside world. There's another group who are living abroad. They're the refugees who have no rights at all in Palestine under the Israeli group. Is it possible for these 2 groups to live together? Or must they fight forever and ever and keep killing each other, knowing that neither group can totally eliminate the other? I submit that Israel, with every possible advantage in the world, military power, amazing, technological advancement, standard of living, nuclear weapons, an arms industry that actually exports, number 6 exporter in the world. Great advances, particularly in the area of drones and smart bombs and smart weapons, plus the support of our country, the world's only superpower, that massively and continuously supports them. And the Palestinians, who are fragmented, powerless, crushed but not defeated, whose friends are even worse than their enemies. That's the truth. These 2 people cannot get rid of each other. Is there a solution for them to live together? I believe there is. But to do that, we have to really change those 2 ideologies. Palestinians have to acknowledge and change a little bit their Palestinian nationalism to include also the Jewish Israelis who are living there and who are going nowhere. Who are going nowhere. And Israelis also have to change their Zionism, their desire for a Jewish state, to acknowledge that they can have their Jewish state, but it also has to be an Arab state as well. Because 7 million people living, half the people living under its control are not Jewish. So what do you do with them? Apartheid, one set of laws for Jews and one set for non-Jews? It doesn't work anymore. Suppression, forever denying them their rights. Killing them, genocide. All of them? Really? Or do you find a formula for them to live together as equal citizens of the same single state. Call it what you will. That is hard. It's hard for me as a Palestinian to accept that all these people who came from all over the world would have the same rights that I do. Those who came from Russia, from Poland, from Ethiopia, from the United States, from Kazakhstan, from Iraq, from Egypt, from everywhere, that they have the same rights that I do. It's hard. But also they have to accept that they can't have an exclusively Jewish state, that they have to deal with the non-Jews who are indigenous to that land. So you say, how do you deal with demography? If Palestinians are given the right of return, just as Jews have the right to return there, that's what they call it, can they live together? Can there be true equality? What about the demographic balance? What happens when the Arabs become the majority? Well, you need to have a structure that allows the democratically the majority to rule, but that protects the rights of the minority. If you think democracy means 51% of the electorate, or 51% of the electoral college votes, can totally eliminate the rest of the country, you're wrong. There has to be a constitution. There has to be protection for the rights of the minorities and for the rights of the individual against the majority. So yes, we will need a special constitution that guarantees the rights of the Arabs and the Jews, regardless of who happens to be in a majority. We also have to have institutions that ensure that protection, that prohibit discrimination in all public areas. Private areas you cannot control. How I feel about Jewish people and how Jewish people would feel about a Muslim or Muslims feel about a Christian, you cannot control. But you can have laws like we do in the States that guarantee equality and that prohibit discrimination, with special courts that ensure that even the Parliament and the Congress here doesn't pass laws that take away the rights of the minorities. So that way you guarantee equality. You say, what about security? The Israelis are all hung up on security. We need to protect ourselves. We cannot trust anybody else. We were massacred, annihilated. So we need to have security. Okay, I can understand that. Even though it wasn't our fault, I can understand that trauma. So at least in my vision, you can have the defense minister, the head of the army, navy, air force, nuclear weapons, always be a Jewish person with an Arab deputy, but the head of the police for internal security will always be a Palestinian Arab with a Jewish deputy, because we have our trauma also. We have suffered from Israeli police and from Israeli internal control. More importantly, 10% of the budget, the defense budget, should go to a special department whose job it is to remove the causes of hatred, the causes of bitterness, the causes of injustice, that help each group understand the history and the language and the background of the other, that works on healing the trauma that these people went through, compensating and giving reparation to people who have lost their homes. Because we don't want to uproot anybody from their home, whether it's in Jaffa or Haifa where they're living in an Arab house, or whether it's in a settlement in the West Bank where they've built a house on Arab land. Either way, they can continue to live there on the basis of equality, and people will be compensated out of public land. You know, there's a lot of public land in Palestine. Most of it has been confiscated from Arabs to begin with. But there is a lot of commonly held land that should belong to all the citizens, not to Jews only. Now, you say this is very utopian, idealistic. Yes, it is. It's a vision. It's an idea. It's a dream. But it's something that's worth working for and towards. I love the slogan that you started with, Mr. Muhyiddin, where you say, from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free to everybody living there. Free doesn't mean free of Arabs or free of Jews, but freedom for all the residents of that land in true and genuine equality, in true and genuine dignity. That view is different, both from Arab nationalism, Palestine Arabiya, and from Zionism, as Jewish as France is French. But it is something that's possible. Because, let me tell you, neither group who is living in Palestine today can survive or thrive or fight the other group without massive external support. Not possible. Palestinians desperately need, we don't always get, help and support from the Arab and the Muslim world, without which we really cannot even survive. But Israeli Jews also cannot survive without massive military, financial, trade, and diplomatic support from people outside. So you in the outside world are essential either to keep the fighting going and extend it longer and longer, as the Biden administration did, or bring it to an end in a way that satisfies both parties. You cannot do this if you are totally with one party rather than the other. You cannot. If you really love or care for Israeli Jews, if you really feel that they need to have a state where they can feel secure, even though today Israel is the place where Jews are most insecure. But if you really want what's good for them, you will say, you need to start with dealing with your neighbors, with the people who are living on the same land that you are living with. And Palestinians somehow, despite all the pain and injustice of our past, we need to come to terms with Israeli Jews. We don't have to like or accept their ideology or their actions, but we need to find a way to live with them or continue fighting. Continue fighting, because this fight is not going to be resolved. Neither side can resolve it totally. I probably took as long as I'm allowed to, and I really think that the ideas I am throwing out are sufficiently challenging that some of you may have something to say about them. Maybe disagree with me. Maybe point out something else that I totally missed in my presentation. maybe tell me that I have misrepresented one group or the other. I am speaking, yes, as a Palestinian, and I'm also speaking as a Christian, and I'm also speaking as a lawyer who likes law and who likes international law and who believes in the human rights of everybody. But I'm also speaking as a person who doesn't believe that violence will solve any problem. Violence will not give the Israelis security and will not give us liberation. Frankly, to out-violence the Israelis, what do we have to do to out-violence the Israelis? The amount of firepower that is required to out-violence the Israelis is horrendous to even contemplate. So yes, I am a pacifist. I believe in nonviolence. These are my biases, and I'm upfront about them. So your turn. Tell me your thoughts, preferably in question form, and maybe we can continue this discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jonathan. Could we have that first slide up, please? Okay, it's your turn. We want everybody who has a question, a comment, to please, we want to hear from every one of you if you want to say something, but please be brief.
What do you foresee with the new administration coming in?
Tough question. I think in the short term, I foresee a pause or an end to the ongoing daily bombardment in Gaza and in Lebanon for a number of reasons. It's already taken too long, and it'll be an easy thing for this administration to tell the Israelis, stop it. Let's stop it. So in the short term, I think there will be an immediate, some kind of ceasefire, some kind of deal. But it's not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be very helpful to Palestinians. I think there will be some people already who are very powerful in the new Trump administration who would like to get rid of the Palestinian problem totally. So there will be very little attempt to give Palestinians genuine independence or to give their point of view a genuine hearing. I think there will be an annexation of the rest of the West Bank, at least of Area C. A total destruction of the two-state solution, not that it was at all being pursued by the current administration. There will be a lot of, maybe a revival of UNRWA, whether it's under its name or under another name. There will be some kind of international provision of immediate relief. Flour, tents, medicine, hopefully schools, very important for the Palestinians. Because that's what UNRWA was doing, actually. UNRWA was providing relief, work, mostly schools and clinics. So, yes, there will be a revival of some international body to meet the immediate needs of Palestinians. I'm not sure that, I don't know, maybe they can come up with something that's worse than this administration, but I don't know what they will do that's worse. But yeah, I think immediately there will be a little relief, but some really right-wing views that will try to eliminate the Palestinians as a political entity. They don't like Hamas, they don't like UNRWA, they don't like the Palestinian Authority, they don't like Palestinians. They're in the mode of total denial and total elimination, which they cannot do. They cannot do. History does not allow the total elimination of the Palestinian people at this time.
Thank you for a wonderful lecture there. And I have a question for you, more of a philosophical nature, and it's something I've been really thinking a lot about, which is why, in your estimation, do you think South Africa was successful at basically tearing down, an apartheid regime and establishing a functioning pluralistic government, where after 80 years of war and bloodshed in Palestine, that has not really been something that has materialized? What is different about that part of the world than South Africa?
Okay, good question. Good question, because I think both South Africa and Israel were the two last gasps of settler colonialism in the world. And after South Africa, apartheid itself became a crime under international law, which it wasn't before. I think one reason is demography. The numbers there were just too overwhelming. They weren't like 50-50. There was a huge gap with a huge black or mixed color population and a small white group. But it took a long time. And there wasn't that massive support for apartheid as there is now for Zionism. There wasn't the same lobby in the United States, although this government and the British government, until the very end almost, were supporting that regime. So there are many clear similarities between the two. Ultimately, I think both regimes are anachronistic. Anachronistic means they're out of their place in history. If Zionism came about 3 or 4 centuries ago, Israel would probably be a light to the nations, a very progressive country. Today, it cannot happen anymore. You cannot have apartheid anymore. You cannot have a regime built and based on inequality and somehow expect the rest of the world to accept it. We are seeing increasingly a loss of legitimacy and acceptance of Zionism throughout the world, including among the Jewish populations. What we see with the students and with the young people, including Jewish young people, is a repudiation of Jewish supremacy and an assertion that this anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. I thank God every day for my Jewish brothers and sisters who are brave enough to stand Jewish Voice for Peace. They are total allies. They are our supporters. And we need to stand with them in fighting anti-Jewish bigotry, which continues to exist even in this country.
Okay, I want to add a brief comment to that, since I was involved in the anti-apartheid movement. We founded here in Tucson something called Tucsonans Against Apartheid. At that time, the United States was the only country that did not impose sanctions on South Africa. All the international community was against apartheid and implemented sanctions against South Africa. But the apartheid regime resisted. Why? Because the United States of America, okay, did not stand with the rest of humanity. This is what's happening now. This is what's happening now.
Could you talk about the role of the ADL
All right. The, uh, the, the United States, the unconditional support of Israel by the United States, okay, is the one reason that that prevented Israeli government from taking a position towards peace. This Israeli government and the ones before, the most extreme Israeli government, has no incentive to end the occupation, to end the apartheid, to build peace for both Palestinians and Israelis. Why? Because the United States of America tells them, we'll give you whatever you need to continue this brutality, okay? So why does our government do that? There are unconditional support, or the Israeli lobby that we hear about, AIPAC, or the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, okay, has a lot of influence. But that lobby is not only in Washington, D.C. It's here in Tucson, Arizona, represented by the Jewish Federation and the Jewish Community Relations Council. Yes, I am going to say it, okay? And I've said it before, okay? We need to stand up to this Jewish establishment that continues to unconditionally support military aid to Israel and consequently prevents peace from happening. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, which did tremendous work against bigotry and discrimination in this country, okay? Now, what they do is only focused on fighting advocates for Palestinian rights. That's what they do. In this last election, they were involved in 364 races. They support anybody, Republican, Democrat, whatever you are. We don't care what you believe in, as long as you promise to keep funding for Israel continuing, okay? For the first time in history, they spent $20 million in a primary, $20 million to defeat Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, two black Democratic Party members. Okay? They aligned themselves with the extreme right, Christians United for Israel. The American Legislative Exchange Council, to make laws that make our free speech a crime. We can boycott any country in the world. We can boycott our own products, but we can't boycott Israel. It's illegal. You want to add to that, Thabit? Where did he, Thabit, go?
Out of Majal. Okay.
All right, yeah. Well, thank you. Let's, anybody else?
Next to next.
So I guess the practical question that I have is, what do we do? What's the solution?
Good question. I was waiting for this. I think it's important to realize that while we cannot be too optimistic in the short term, we don't give up hope, because we are on the right side of history. And the arc of history, however long, bends towards justice. It's hard to tell people who are right in the midst of oppression that ultimately you're going to win. But that's the truth. Ultimately, we will win. Ultimately, Jews and Arabs will live together in a free Palestine. Call it what you will. Now, to work towards that, there are many things we can do. One of the most important things is to organize ourselves, to educate ourselves, to challenge the one narrative by presenting not only a second narrative, but also a hopeful solution. Present something that they can think about, rather than, what do you want us to do? Give up? No, we want you to work with us towards something good. We also need to be clear about principles and values. For example, the value of human life. All lives are important. So when you hear about, Bet Lahia last week, the Israelis have stopped even making excuses. They destroyed a building, killing about 93 people, women and children mostly, all of them civilians. They didn't even pretend that they were going after some kind of military objective. They said there was a person on the roof who was looking and giving directions, tetzpitan they call him in Hebrew, an observer on the roof. Well, an observer, you send a sniper, or you send, you have the technology. You can kill that person. You don't have to destroy a multi-story building. So we have to talk about the value of human rights. We have to talk about the illegality of cutting off water and food. You're not doing us a favor by allowing food to be allowed in. You have to, yes, talk about releasing the civilian hostages. Hostages, I think they should be released without any condition. The civilians. But you should talk about making a deal about exchanging the prisoners of war, the soldiers, with prisoners. This administration keeps saying, oh, it is Hamas that is refusing it, because they don't listen to what the Israelis are saying. I listen to the Hebrew news online all the time. And in Israel, they all say it is Netanyahu who is preventing a deal and who deliberately is refusing to allow a deal to take place. So we have to talk about international law, about the ICJ, and about the International Criminal Court. We cannot, people are always talking about how the United States is supplying money and weapons. The worst thing that the United States is doing is providing an umbrella, a diplomatic umbrella, so that Israel can avoid the consequences of their action, so that they can act with impunity. And this umbrella one day will be removed. It's like a balloon. Israelis are living in a bubble. They don't know that the rest of the world can see what they're doing and does not agree with them. And one day that bubble will burst, and the Israelis will find themselves with no protection whatsoever. And at that time, I think they will need all of us to stand. And they need all of us to protect them. Because right now, the world cannot stand what they're doing. It is awful. It is awful. We have to make sure that our opposition to the policies of the State of Israel and to Zionism is based on principles and values because of what they do. And if they stop doing it, we should welcome them as siblings, as brothers and sisters who are traumatized themselves and who are traumatizing us now on a daily basis. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's work to be done among the churches. There's work to be done with evangelicals in this country. There's a theological task that needs to be done. And FOSNA has a lot of programs for dealing with the theology, with evangelicals, with Christian Zionism, that, resources that can be available to you. So I hope you all would sign up our sheets so that you can get some of our publications and have access to our resources. There are campaigns for congregations to be put together with the families of Palestinian prisoners so that they can begin to develop a relationship and see us as human beings. We need to also deal with the American Jewish community, because don't think of them only as enemies. Think of them as people who are gravely conflicted, who are in crisis, moral and ethical crisis, because they're worried about what's happening, but they also really don't feel supportive of what Israel is doing. So they're conflicted, and they need real friends, not people who tell them, we'll support you no matter what you do. Because real friends are willing to confront them for what they're doing. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of education also to be done.
You talk about Israel having the power and the Palestinians having no power. Well, to change the more powerful, there needs to be sanctions, or there needs to be somehow some pressure. I noticed that the Italian and French airlines refused to fly to Tel Aviv. Now, I noticed several European countries recognizing the state of Palestine and Israelis removing their ambassadors. What other things do you see as applying pressure to Israel to actually begin listening to some of the criticism?
Certainly, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, BDS, are non-violent forms of applying this pressure. And I'll tell you something else. Israel is much more vulnerable to BDS than South Africa ever was. It's a tiny country. They cannot live without the rest of the world. South Africa could. China can. Russia maybe. But Israel cannot. They need the rest of the world for culture, for sports, for songs, for literature, and for trade, and for supplies. They need the rest of the world. So they are very vulnerable towards a non-violent action. Sanctions mean there are courts. You will be arrested and brought to The Hague for your war crimes. Part of the work that Al-Haq has been doing, and probably the reason why they were declared to be a terrorist organization, is because we've been documenting and preparing files for specific and individuals, generals and commanders and officers who are committing war crimes and crimes against humanity so that they can be brought to The Hague.
Question. Okay, 2 questions.
Thanks for your discussion. It's been great. I was just wondering earlier when there was a discussion about South Africa. I noticed that you didn't mention how much the U.S. military-industrial complex, is profiting off of this, and how I kind of think of Israel as like just a military base in the Middle East to ensure there's no pan-Arab, whatever, that Arab states can't work together. And I was wondering what you think about that and what people in Palestine in general think about that. Like, do they view a lot of this as just a way for private companies like Raytheon, for example, to profit and or do they see it as like the U.S. is really invested in this Zionist philosophy and religious movement, or do people see it as both?
No, I think there is no question that the military-industrial complex in this country has developed very close relationship with the Israeli military. And they both benefit at the expense of the American taxpayer and at the expense of the people of Palestine and of Israel. But I'm a biased person. I'm a pacifist. I don't like the military. I don't like violence. I don't like the use of more and more powerful weapons, the use of AI to give you a longer list of goals and of targets. The horrendous use of automatic weapons thank you. There is a sense in which these people are having a good time. They're just selling more and more weapons. They don't care whether it's the Ukraine or Israel. It doesn't matter. One of the reasons why I think Trump got at least some votes was because he's saying, what business do we have sending all our money and all our weapons to the Ukraine and Israel? I don't think he will stop sending weapons to Israel. Maybe he'll stop them to the Ukraine. My point is, we need to have our values reflected in our government's policy. Right now, they're not. Right now, it's the powerful, it's the rich, it's the military-industrial complex, it's AIPAC, it's Kufi, who have the ability to influence U.S. policy. We need ordinary citizens to say, this is wrong. This is not helpful. This is not helping us as a country. It's not helping an international order. It is destroying, undermining the principles of international law. It is making these courts, can you imagine a country threatening the judges of the international criminal courts? We will attack you and your family. And your family. These are the threats that are being made by Israel and by the U.S. against these international bodies. This is horrible, and we should put an end to it.
Well, thank you for your talk today, and thanks for your patience. So in your talk, you kind of glossed over the early, I'll say, really pernicious beginnings of the Zionist movement. For good reason, it's the past. But how do we let the true narrative, or one of the true narratives, like the Palestinian position, how do we how do we get that to be expressed in this country so people understand that the glossed over history of Israel and Palestine and Zionism isn't the truth as recognized by the people who live in that area?
It's a battle. It's not easy because they realize BDS is difficult, so they started creating laws against BDS. They realize that the students and the universities are waking up, so there's a lot of pressure now on all universities and colleges. Even what is being taught in the universities is now being, they're trying to silence it. So it's a battle. If we think that it's going to be easy, it's not going to be easy. But it's a battle that can be won. It's a battle where we are on the right side of history. And the world, the entire world, is with us. And one of the ways that we can win that battle is by addressing and appealing to the other side as well. Listening with sensitivity, challenging with care and dignity and integrity their positions, showing that we care about their fears and their concerns, and that we have them in mind. We're not just thinking about Palestinians, we're also thinking about Israelis and how they will live in this situation. The people don't realize the trauma that is now in Israel. I heard yesterday that about 22 US soldiers every day commit suicide because of post-traumatic syndrome from Afghanistan and Iraq. Israelis are also getting traumatized, and they are committing suicide, and they don't know how to live with the consequences of what they're doing. Because you can't go around and kill and shoot women and children and then go back home and sleep quietly with your children and send your children to nurseries and schools where their teachers have been committing genocide against other children and babies. I mean, the effect on a society like Israel, they're going to be feeling this for many years to come. I know it is nothing compared to the effect on Palestinians who are being slaughtered. But in the end, we have to show sensitivity and caring for both sides if we have any chance of winning.
How do you think the United Nations should be reformed?
Oh my goodness. Good question. The United Nations was created at the end of World War II, and a number of organizations were created. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, December 10. The International Criminal Court. A whole number of organizations were created because of the horrors of World War II. The problem is that people say, what do we do with rogue countries? They were thinking seriously about outlawing war, making war itself illegal. So what do you do with rogue countries? Well, we have to have a Security Council where we can control any country that just goes berserk. But the powerful 5 members of the Security Council retained to themselves veto power because they did not want to be controlled. And today, the veto power is being used by the United States, I think 36 different times, to protect Israel from real sanctions by the international community. So yes, the United Nations needs to be reformed. My hope is that the horrors of Gaza will create a movement an international movement to reform the United Nations, to improve international law, to reaffirm rather than dilute international conventions that prohibit, for example, the killing of civilians or the forced movement of people, and that protect hospitals and ambulances and relief workers, and that prohibit the use of starvation as a weapon of war. I think that can happen. I think it can happen. It happened already at the end of World War II, and maybe it will happen again at the end of the Gaza events.
And people of the world should have equal power and representation there, not only the superpowers that control our lives. And here we have Jennifer from Jewish Voice for Peace has an announcement before we leave.
Yeah, I just want to tell people that next Saturday, the 16th, Dr. Feroz Sidwa of North, he's a doctor in Stockton, California. He was one of the doctors who went to Gaza this past year. He'll be here to speak at St. Francis in the Foothills at 5 p.m. That's next Saturday.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please stay in touch. This is our website there, ArizonaPalestine.org. And a lot of you I know are on Instagram. So you can go to AZ2. I know somebody's looking at me there. My granddaughter goes to Instagram. AZ2, number 2, Palestine. That's our handle there. And I think our store is still open. We have ceramics, olive oil, and other goodies in there. And if you would like to donate to us, we have donation jars there. You can write a check to APSA/AFGJ, or